The South African Medical Journal published an editorial concerning the legality of psychoactive substances such as marijuana by its former managing editor, Professor J.P. van Niekerk. He states that it has been proven that the war on drugs has failed and that it's about time South Africa reopens the debate on the decriminalisation of these substances and reconsiders its policies. Now, today we are fortunate to be joined from Cape Town by Professor J.P. van Niekerk to continue what is now known as the #Dagga debate for those of you that are very tech savvy right here on Newsroom. Very good morning to you, Professor van Niekerk. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Decriminalising cannabis has been spoken about for years. Yes, there is Mario Ambrosini's Medical Innovation Bill on the table now in Parliament. But do you think there's still a lack of progress regarding this issue or even debate here in South Africa?
Well, in fact, South Africa is moving, but I think it's moving in the wrong direction when it talks about the decriminalisation of the use of marijuana for medical purposes only. The world is, in fact, changing, and we need to take cognizance of what's happening elsewhere in the world and take action ourselves in a different direction, I believe.
Let's talk about how harmful cannabis is, and I'm sure something you are very familiar with. Drugs are regulated according to classification systems that purport to relate to the harms and risks of each drug. But it's been found this classification of drugs at times is unscientific, unsystematic and arbitrary. Is that accurate?
Yes, it's accurate that the international classification that's accepted by the anti-drug and war on drugs lobby is arbitrary and is unscientific. For instance, when you look at the classification of drugs on scientific grounds, on the harm it does to the person, to their family, or to the society, then in fact drugs which are not regarded in that international classification as dangerous, alcohol and cigarettes, are in fact in the top section of dangerous drugs to people and to society, whereas marijuana in fact is much less dangerous than those two legal drugs.
Why is it then that these substances that cause the most damage, like alcohol, cigarettes and prescription medication, are so easily accessible to all people in society today?
Well, the society, particularly in the United States during the Prohibition days of alcohol, tried to ban the use of alcohol, but it was a resounding failure, and so then alcohol became accepted but regulated, and likewise with cigarettes. If one legalizes, you must also regulate. So where cigarettes, for instance, were 50% of people in the United States were addicted to cigarettes, today it's only 20%. And that was caused by increasing the price of cigarettes and also making it socially unacceptable. So there are methods of regulating all drugs, and I think that that's the way in which we should be moving.
Professor van Niekerk, you talk about the cannabis measures we have in place in South Africa now being counterproductive. Why do you say that?
Well, the worldwide evidence is that criminalizing people and putting them in jail because they use drugs is likely to make them hardened criminals rather than to reform them. And so a measure of the success or otherwise of the war on drugs is the size of your prison population. The country which is the most vociferous in its war on drugs, the United States, has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of its prison population, and that's largely due to their war on drugs. So that's one measure. The other measure would be something like homicide rates in the world. In the UK and other Western countries, homicide rates about 1 per 100,000 per year. In the United States, that's 5 times that. In the countries that in fact are the conduits for the drugs going to the United States, like Mexico, it's many, many times that of the United States. Today, the world leader in homicides is Honduras, and that's again because it's a conduit for the drugs going to the United States and elsewhere. So those are just 2 examples of the harms. But there are farmers who have no other means of support, who grow crops like marijuana or cocoa, and their lives have been devastated by the war on drugs, and there are better ways of dealing with that.
Professor, finally, what about drug abuse and the way that we approach drug abuse here in South Africa and globally? Do we require a rethink around that?
I think that South Africa has a good view about the treatment of drug abuse. I think that it requires more resources, and I think by taking the use of drugs out of the criminal arena and making it a social and public health issue would be much more helpful, so that in fact education and rehabilitation become a much more important part of that, and all over it's been shown that that is the way to go.
Professor J.P. van Niekerk, thank you very much for joining us and giving us your insightful views on the war against drugs, the former managing editor of the South African Medical Journal. That's Professor J.P. van Niekerk coming to us live from Cape Town. Time for us to have a look